I think we're good. All right. Welcome to Leadership in Action. I am Renee Meddy, Senior Partner at Orca HR, and I am here with Paul O'Byrne, our CEO. And if you're new here, we show up every week at 9 o'clock for about 15 minutes to share common leadership challenges with actionable tips that you can implement right away. And today is one of my favorite topics, coaching.
And so, Renee, when you think about coaching, like what do you think of the difference, like we say, between coaching and mentoring, which some people may be confused?
When I talk with anyone that's new or even has had coaching before, I give the same explanation because there's such a low barrier to entry to coaching. Anyone can change their title on LinkedIn and call themselves a coach. And by no means do I think if you're certified that you are a better coach. I started not certified in coaching. And so with coaching, the perspective, I like giving the definition just as we're trained, is that everyone that coming to coaching is whole, creative, resourceful. You've got everything you need, but sometimes you just can't read the label from inside the jar. We can be so close to our own stuff that it takes like a third party objective person to pull us out and to give a broader overview. And we do that by what is called asking powerful questions. So these are questions that are open-ended, process-oriented. They're not leading you to any particular outcome or answer or solution. They are typically not yes or no questions. And so a pure 30-minute coaching session is all questions. So if you ask a question, I ask you a question back. And some people love that. And some people are like, just tell me what to do. And so that falls more under advising and consulting, tips, tricks, different strategies. Um, it often sounds like, hey, I have the situation. How have you guided people through that? Or how have other people handled it? Or, what have you seen that works? And so that's more the advising consulting model. And then mentoring is usually you are working with someone that has already done or is doing what you want to do. So it's within the same field, within the same role. Um, and often what happens is it's some combination of all of that. But I love sharing with people what pure coaching is because that's where the juice is. Asking the right questions in the right way, in the right moment, is what will help create long sustainable behavior change. And um, more from a high performance transformative side, it changes the way you show up in the world, the what, like how you look at things. So that is my definition of coaching.
Yeah, yeah. So just, I became a certified coach with the ICF, which is the International Coaching Federation, which, they have a sort of a whole sort of guideline that they have a definition of coaches, which I think is sort of similar to your own, maybe a little bit more formal, where they sort of say coaches is partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their potential and their personal and professional potential. So and I think what I love about what you said is, and this is where, I remember, working with many different leaders, and sometimes people, when they said they're sent to coaching, it's like, well, you must be broken, right?
Mhm.
And so like coaching sometimes used to be seen as like almost a corrective thing,
Mhm.
as opposed to it's really around helping you maximize who you already are. But
Yeah.
but sometimes there are things that get in your way of you being your best, right?
Yeah.
You have the potential, but it's helping people realize that potential. And that's why, I think questions can be much more powerful, sort of ask, don't tell. Because like when you tell, what's one of the outcomes of when you tell?
Well, the danger of coming in with advice and telling people is that if I hire a coach and you do that kind of initial get to know you and you start kind of unraveling all the pieces. Well, there are things I do in my life that I would never think to tell someone because I either assume it's so natural to me that I assume that everybody does it not does it the same way, but knows it, or it's just kind of an underlying assumption. Well, if the person receiving the information doesn't know that piece and they give me a piece of advice, but had I shared something different, they might give me other advice. So there, it's kind of like the GPS and the 1 degree difference. They might be sending you in a totally different direction. And it creates that model of when you're telling people, that's like the top down, like the teacher student or the expert, you know, expert student model, which is fine in some cases. But in a coaching model, it's not beneficial to the person receiving coaching, because you want them to be able to go out and think for themselves, take the actions from an intrinsic place, not always looking externally.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things, it also takes away for their opportunity to grow,
Hmm.
you know, or to solve the issue for themselves, or to take accountability for it themselves, you
Yeah.
know.
You don't want them to be reliant um, on their coach.
Right. Yeah, and then as you said, it's sort of top down, so it creates more of a dependency.
Hmm. Yeah.
But it's very easy to fall into telling and problem solving as a manager, as a leader, because you obviously want to kind of get things done and you're kind of focused on that. But that might be short term and you might get better longer results,
Yeah. Hmm.
So that's one of the challenges sometimes, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and there are so many coaches out there that call themselves coaches, and all they do is tell and
Right.
give advice. And the other perspective, I think you come from this too, is that if I'm coaching you and you go do a thing and get this amazing result, the coach tends to, oh, I forget the two words, correlated. They think causation versus correlation. So there's correlation, but that doesn't mean that because of our coaching, that's the cause. There were so many people and so many experiences that you had prior to our session that invited you to take the next step. That doesn't mean that I was the cause in helping you get to where you are. I'm just another piece of the puzzle. And so
Right.
that's the
And-
the caveat I'd add in there is like the I don't know that any coach is the cause, because you would have had to be open, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, you were ready to hear the thing that led you to take the next action.
Yeah, like going back to the definition of, the ICF, one of the things that start off is you're partnering with somebody, right?
Yeah.
And you're walking alongside them. You're not
Yeah.
carrying them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you're kind of helping them go on that journey,
Yeah.
and sometimes that journey can be uncomfortable and stuff like that. And so
And the
you're
mentoring
helping,
that you mentioned is slightly different, because you are following someone that's done what you want to do, but that still applies that even if you did everything your mentor did, doesn't mean you're going to get the same results, because you're two totally different people,
right.
right?
And so you're doing it in a thought-provoking and creative way, because what you're sort of doing inquiry and encouraging reflection,
Hmm.
which then helps people learn. And then you're inspiring action because you're helping people see what they already have and the strengths that they have, you know? Um, I wanted to chat, and you're kind of maximizing potential.
Yeah.
But what is one of the, like what is one of the other key skills that leaders and managers need to have, not just asking questions? What do you think are one of the other key skills?
In a coaching model
Yeah,
specifically.
yeah. Or if I'm a manager and a leader, like, okay, I have to learn how to ask, questions that are bigger than myself, or questions that are bigger than the problem, not
Yeah.
questions I already know the answer to, because that's kind of leading.
I was going to say the listening. So if you're asking a
Listening,
question,
yeah, yeah,
you absolutely have to listen from their perspective and which requires your own self-awareness to know where your biases are, um, where you're listening from already. There was a program I did, uh, they call it already listening, or already almost listening, where people hear from their own perspective and experience. And there's a big difference between listening completely open, not kind of with beginner's mind, right? Like, new, I have no idea what this person's going to say. And even if I think I know, I'm going to offer a curiosity like I don't know, because more often than not, people are listening to respond than they are to really hold that space for actual listening, because then other things can show up that you never would have imagined.
Yeah, so it's like you're listening just to kind of respond, which is going back into sort of the telling mode.
Hmm.
And, like a story I have about listening that I think is so critical and also relates to coaching is, I was coaching a senior executive, and we started off our conversation where I literally asked him a question, based on, I could see from his demeanor that there was obviously something bothering or challenging, right?
Hmm.
And they spoke for about 40 minutes, right? I didn't say one word. And then at the end of this, they said, wow, that was really great. I think I now have solved that issue myself.
Often, that's what
Right.
happens.
And
Yeah.
and and so one of the things of people articulating to somebody who's really caring and listening, it
Hmm.
allows them to solve the challenge themselves,
Yeah. And you
which
mentioned
could be
too,
so powerful.
yeah, you mentioned earlier too about the different kinds of questions. We talk about it open-ended questions, but there's also taking into consideration, like I do a lot more mind, body, kind of soul, somatic coaching, which is getting people into their body. But when you ask a question, that automatically puts them in their head. So how you phrase that question, like more how questions versus like, you know, we want to avoid why questions,
My questions, yeah, yeah.
because the brain is the most fallible thing. And if you ask someone why, they can cognitively interpret or have a cognitive understanding, but that doesn't necessarily get to the issue at hand or what direction or solution you want to go. So,
So I'm a new manager and I want to, sort of improve my coaching skills. And, I want to try and experiment a little bit with coaching versus telling or problem solving.
mhm.
What would be one or two things that you would sort of say that you could start doing immediately that's just going to make a difference and help you more in that coaching space?
Yeah, I mean, you always need to start and understand where you're at. So if you, with a new manager, there would be some noticing and observing of, are you a teller all the time? If you ask questions every once in a while, what kind of questions are you asking? But usually I'll have people come up with a handful of questions that they can have at the ready, because sometimes in that moment it's really hard to come up with something when you're newer to the questioning piece of it. But I like to understand with each leader or manager what their level of curiosity is, because the fake it till you make it kind of thing in a coaching relationship doesn't work as well, because there's so much in the feeling, like the person on the other side knows when the question is being asked as a rote thing versus an actual curiosity thing. So we need to understand the leader and how they speak and how they show up and how they're perceived in that relationship to start transitioning them into that. And sometimes I say, if work is too high risk, like look at your partner at home or family or friends or kiddos, and practice there, getting that natural cadence of questioning. Your family will be like, if you're just the
And on.
authoritative parent, right, they'd be like, what, why did they ask me a question? Like, it'll be very noticeable. So the how, sometimes the what, but often the details don't matter because the story kind of muddles things. Um, but the first step would be to kind of observe, like, what's your curiosity level? What kinds of questions, if you've already started down this path of um, coaching model, is what kind of questions are you asking and how can you improve those questions?
Yeah, I know you and I could talk about this all day because it's probably one of our most passionate topics, but for anybody listening or, a leader who wants to practice, slow down, just just listen. And
Mhm.
sometimes just even listening can be, sort of saying, well, tell me more, or what do you mean when you say that? So that you're really trying to engage and listen, and you're coming in with a bit beginner's mind with curiosity. And ask questions you don't know the answers to.
Yes, for
Yeah,
sure.
because falling into that trap. And I think you will, if you sort of just slow down, do some listening and asking some questions, you will actually start seeing your people being able to grow and resolve things. And so it can be very, very powerful. I would encourage people just to experiment with it. As Renee says, you can practice on your friends, your family, just those skills and stuff like that, and make a difference. And so thanks again for another 50 minutes of leadership in action. And we'll be back next Thursday with another discussion topic. Thanks, Renee.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.